You won't believe what happened that morning at the gate. I thought I'd heard every version of this story. At first glance, it looked like yet another outrageous case of discrimination. A black family being escorted out of first class. But soon the shocking truth emerged. They were black billionaires. They owned the entire airline. And that revelation flipped the script in a way nobody saw coming. Here's exactly how it played out. From polite nods at the gate to a confrontation that ended with one simple announcement and a fury you could feel in every passenger's chest. The line to board stretched down the jetway, people clutching carry-ons and boarding passes. Standing out among them was Robert King, his wife Angela King, and their 5-year-old son Noah. Robert wore a tailored navy suit that fit like it was painted on, a sleek leather briefcase in one hand, the other gently resting on Noah's shoulder. Angela floated in behind him in a flowing ivory dress that caught the light, her hair artfully done, and Noah skipped along, clutching a small toy airplane, his eyes bright, oblivious to what was about to happen. When the three stepped into the first-class cabin, the place shimmered under soft amber lighting. The seats were generous, about 25 inches wide, leather so smooth it felt like you were sitting on a cloud. Passengers offered quick nods of welcome as Robert led his family down the aisle. Angela helped Noah climb into his plush seat, handing him that little plane. Nearby, a couple murmured friendly hellos. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary, until the moment a flight attendant sharpened her gaze. Victoria Morgan watched from across the cabin, her lips pressed into a thin line. She adjusted her crisp uniform as though bracing for battle. With a stiff smile, she approached Robert's seat. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clipped. "May I see your boarding passes?" Robert nodded, calm as ever, and retrieved them. Angela looked up, sensing something was off, while Noah played happily with his toy. Victoria studied the tickets like they were a jigsaw puzzle she was losing patience with. Her brow furrowed. "First class?" she asked, as if she couldn't quite believe what she saw. "Yes," Robert replied evenly. "These are our seats." When Victoria didn't respond, Robert felt a flicker of irritation, but he maintained his composure. "I'm sorry," she said, "but I need to confirm something. Please remain here." And with that, she marched off toward the galley curtain, footsteps sharp, leaving a hush in her wake. Behind that curtain, Victoria leaned into the phone, whispering so low only the wall could hear. "There's a family in first class," she told ground staff. "Their names are King. Are you sure they booked correctly?" Back came the answer. "Their tickets were bought weeks ago, fully paid, no issues. The name is confirmed." Victoria's jaw tightened. "No problem then," she barked and hung up. But instead of apologizing to the Kings, she straightened her posture, took a deep breath, and marched back out, her resolve hardening. When she returned, her face held the same forced courtesy but a new edge. "I'm sorry," she said to Robert, "but you and your family will have to step aside for a moment." "Celeste, sorry." Angela bit her lip, exchanging a worried glance with Robert. Noah looked up from his toy, puzzled. "What's going on, Mommy?" he asked. "Nothing, sweetheart," Angela murmured, trying to sound reassuring. Deep down, she knew this was anything but ordinary. In the cabin, a ripple of whispers spread. Passengers leaned forward, curious. A middle-aged man across the aisle asked Angela if everything was okay. She offered a hastily polite smile and said it was just a misunderstanding, but the tension was thick. In the galley, Victoria conferred with a junior attendant, Emily Stone. "He doesn't look like a first-class passenger," Victoria whispered. "If his ticket's valid, that's all that matters," Emily shot back firmly. Victoria brushed past her and returned to Robert. "Sir," Victoria said finally, voice low but sharp, "I'm afraid we must move you and your family to the main cabin until we sort this out." "On what grounds?" Robert asked, his tone polite but carrying unmistakable steel. "It's protocol," she replied without meeting his eyes. He waited a beat, then said, "Very well. Let's resolve it quickly. My family is waiting." At that moment, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated while we make final preparations. The announcement barely registered with Victoria. Her confidence was cracking. Robert stood and pulled out his phone. "Excuse me," he said quietly, dialing a number only he had access to. After a brief pause, he said, "Good, proceed as planned." He ended the call, slipped his phone away, and looked back at Victoria. "Shall we return?" he asked, courteous but commanding. She nodded, though her face drained of color. Together they walked back to the first-class section, all eyes following them. Angela reached for Robert's hand and he gave her a reassuring squeeze. Noah beamed when he saw his dad, but Robert's jaw was set. He helped them both into their seats. Then Victoria reappeared one last time, her voice tight. "We've decided it would be best for you and your family to move to the main cabin now." The words hit like a blow. Robert looked out at the sea of faces around him, some shocked, others outraged, and you could feel the silence roar. At that instant, you knew this was far from over. You step back into their row, heart pounding as you brace for what comes next. Robert King is seated beside Angela, little Noah clutching his toy airplane with wide, uncertain eyes. Victoria Morgan hovers just outside the first-class carpet line, her uniform crisp, but her composure in tatters. The cabin hums with tension so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. Every passenger's eyes are locked on this moment, hungry for the next turn in a story that has already shocked them all. Stefan instantly leans forward, resting a calm hand on Angela's shoulder. He looks up at Victoria in a way that makes her stiffen. His voice is measured but carries an edge that commands the room. "Our tickets were verified," he says. "We paid for these seats in full. If there is a valid reason for us to move, I would like to hear it now." The words land like stones. Victoria's lips part, then close as she flinches under the weight of dozens of gazes. "You see," she begins, but her voice falters. "Protocol requires me to..." She trails off, brow furrowing. Passengers stir, voices rising in indignation. An elderly woman a few rows back leans toward her companion and murmurs, "They have been perfectly polite. What is the problem?" A young man near the window seat shouts, "They are paying customers just like the rest of us. Why are they being singled out?" The entire cabin seems to sway between disbelief and outrage as Victoria's resolve crumbles. "Sir," she says, her tone sharp now, "I do not want to escalate this. Please cooperate or I will have to involve security." Angela's eyes flash at Victoria, pain and anger battling for dominance in her gaze. It is clear the tension is on the verge of snapping. Robert raises a hand. He stands slowly, muscles coiled, adjusting his suit jacket with careful precision. "If you are calling security," he says, "make sure they come ready with an explanation." His calm voice echoes off the walls. You can almost hear the collective intake of breath as the cabin goes still. Victoria's face pales. She swallows hard. Gathering her courage, she steps back toward the galley, voice quavering. "Please gather your belongings," she insists. James's family, sorry, Angela and little Noah, rise obediently. Noah's enthusiastic grin is gone, replaced by a look of confusion. "Mommy, what is happening?" he whispers. Angela forces a reassuring smile, though her eyes glisten. "It is fine, sweetheart," she says. "Daddy is just fixing a mix-up." But her grip on his hand tightens, and you can feel her heart pounding through her chest. The hallway between first class and coach is narrow, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Robert leads his family down the aisle, every step watched by dozens of strangers. He sends a brief text on his phone without looking. His expression is unreadable. A row of crew members watches him pass, some sympathetic, some shamed. They know they are witnessing a turning point. The tension is so raw you can taste it. When Robert reaches the cramped coach seats, he guides Angela and Noah into the small row. The seats are narrow, roughly 17 inches wide, fabric stiff and unyielding. It is the opposite of the wide leather thrones they just left. Yet neither Robert nor Angela shows any sign of discomfort. They sit with dignity, shoulders back, despite the obvious downgrade. Victoria lingers in the galley, hands trembling as she leans on the counter. Snatches of conversation drift back, passengers whispering about how she treated them, about the absurdity of it all. She catches one man say, "That is not okay. He has every right to be in first class." When she hears that, her chest tightens and a wave of shame floods her. She hears Emily Stone's soft voice behind her. "You need to address this now," Emily says quietly. "That man is not someone you underestimate." Victoria nods, cheeks burning. She picks up the phone on the counter. The captain's voice crackles through. "Miss Morgan," he says, "I have just received word from the executive office. We cannot afford to make this worse. You must handle this delicately." She whispers that she understands, but her voice is barely audible. She glances at Robert King, back in coach, his posture calm but his eyes alert. She knows she has misjudged him and that he will not let her get away with it. Up in first class, murmurs have turned into open criticism. A tall man in a pinstripe suit leans toward a colleague and says, "That was outrageous. You could hear the tension in his voice." The colleague nods, eyes narrowing at Victoria as she passes by. Down in coach, Robert watches it all unfold. He sees the humiliation on Victoria's face when she realizes just who she has crossed. He feels a tight satisfaction, but keeps his expression cool. Angela rests her hand on Robert's arm, drawing strength from his calm. Little Noah tucks his airplane under his arm, eyes still wide but comforted by his parents' steady presence. Moments later, Victoria appears at the coach aisle, face ashen. She steadies herself and takes a step forward, then another, before finally reaching the Kings. "Mr. King," she says, voice barely above a whisper. "On behalf of the airline, I apologize for the inconvenience your family experienced. It was an error in judgment. I take full responsibility." Angela meets her gaze, anger simmering. "Now you realize it was an error?" she asks quietly. Veronica's apology is hollow in the hush of the cabin. "You humiliated us," Angela continues, voice cracking with emotion. "You made assumptions about my husband, about us." Little Noah looks up at Victoria, confusion and hurt in his eyes. Victoria's throat tightens. "I am so sorry," she repeats. "I cannot change what happened. I can only say I am sorry." Robert leans forward, voice calm but firm. "Thank you for your apology. I appreciate that. But an apology is only words unless it is backed by action. We expect to be returned to first class now." His words are polite, yet carry an unmistakable steel. The cabin watches, breath held. A hush falls as the captain's voice crackles over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we regret the inconvenience. We are reinstating the King family in first class immediately. Please allow them to return to their original seats." The cabin erupts in cheers and applause. The relief and vindication ripple through the Kings. Angela's eyes shine with tears. Robert stands and offers his hand to Victoria. Though she hesitates, she takes it. They walk together up the aisle past passengers who smile and nod in respect. You can feel the momentum shift, all negativity washed away by the crowd's solidarity. Once back in first class, Robert settles his family into their spacious seats once more. The leather cushions feel like a throne beneath him. Angela sits beside him, relief softening her features, and little Noah beams, tugging his parents' hands excitedly. Victoria stands nearby, head bowed. The captain's voice comes one final time. "Again, we apologize for the error. Your comfort and safety are our top priority. Thank you for your patience." The tension dissolves into murmurs of approval. Crew members exchange glances, some ashamed, some supportive. Emily Stone touches Victoria's arm gently. "It will be okay," she says softly. Victoria nods, heavy with guilt and relief. The moment of reckoning has passed, but its impact lingers. Robert turns to the window and watches the wing glide through clouds, feeling the weight of power and respect settle around him. He catches Angela's eye and smiles. They made it through together. At that instant, They are not just a family on a flight. They are a symbol of dignity prevailing over prejudice. The cabin is charged with a renewed sense of unity. Strangers strike up conversations about what happened. Some share their own stories of discrimination. Others vow to speak up next time they see injustice. In that confined metal tube soaring miles above the ground, a small but powerful shift has occurred. Cruelness was met with grace. Humiliation was met with unwavering poise. And prejudice was met with justice served in the most satisfying way. As the flight continues, Robert leans back and takes a deep breath. He glances at Angela, at Noah sleeping peacefully with the toy airplane in his arms. He knows this story will travel far beyond these clouds. It will be shared, dissected, and remembered. Because when a family stands up for its dignity, when a man chooses calm strength over rage, the world cannot help but take notice. And that, more than anything, is the sweetest form of vindication. The cabin felt electric as the applause faded into murmurs of approval. Robert King settled back into his plush leather seat, the 25-inch cushion cradling him like a throne, while Angela leaned over to brush a stray hair from little Noah's forehead. Victoria Morgan hovered nearby, her cheeks flushed, her eyes reddened as she tried to muster enough courage to approach again. Emily Stone stood off to the side, arms crossed but eyes sympathetic, as though waiting for the moment to step in. You could feel the tension shift in the air. What began as shock and indignation had morphed into a powerful sense of solidarity among the passengers. Cameras and smartphones were raised, recording every second, ready to share this dramatic victory across social media in an instant. Robert tapped a quick message into his phone. Moments later, a hush fell as the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we sincerely apologize for the earlier inconvenience. The airline's CEO has requested to address you directly on behalf of the company. Please remain seated while we connect." A collective intake of breath swept through the cabin, heads swiveling toward the overhead speakers. You could almost taste the anticipation. Seconds later, the captain returned to the microphone. "This is Captain Walter speaking. I have the CEO of Horizon Air on the line. Please bear with us. Mr. Robert King, would you kindly accept this call?" Robert exchanged a glance with Angela, then tapped his earphone. He met Victoria's gaze before nodding. In that split second, the entire plane felt as though it were suspended in time. Through Robert's earpiece came a composed, resonant voice. "Mr. King, this is Margaret Sinclair, CEO of Horizon Air. I want to extend my deepest apologies for the distress you and your family endured. It was a clear error in judgment, and I take full responsibility. We will be issuing a full refund for your tickets, a lifetime business class membership for 3, and a donation of $1 million to the Equal Justice Initiative in your name. I assure you, our policies will be overhauled to prevent anything like this from ever happening again." The cabin erupted in quiet gasps and whispers of approval. Angela's eyes glistened as she nodded in appreciation. Robert held up a hand and said, "Thank you, Ms. Sinclair. Your words mean a great deal. I know you cannot undo the harm, but these actions speak volumes. We accept your apology and look forward to seeing the changes implemented." He paused, letting the magnitude of that moment settle. "For now, our family will enjoy the rest of this flight in peace." Everyone heard that final phrase as a settled decree. Back in the galley, Victoria Morgan collapsed into a seat, shoulders shaking. Emily Stone knelt beside her. "You did the right thing in the end," Emily said softly. "You owned up to your mistake." Victoria rubbed her forehead. "I can't believe how quickly everything spiraled. I judged them in a heartbeat. I'm going to fix this." A single tear traced down her cheek as she steeled herself to rejoin the cabin crew. In first class, the passengers erupted into applause again, fist-bumping strangers and patting each other on the back. A retired school teacher next to Robert turned and said, "That was the proudest moment I've seen in a long time." The young couple across the aisle raised their glasses of complimentary champagne. The flight attendant who had served them earlier stepped up with an apology of her own, handing each passenger a gift box, a selection of gourmet chocolates, and a personal note that read, "We are sorry for the prejudice you witnessed. We pledge to learn and do better." Down in the main cabin, a ripple of excitement spread as screens lit up with live social media feeds. Passengers watched the tweet storm unfold. King family victory trending worldwide. A group of flight attendants gathered around a tablet, watching news anchors on their phones. The story had gone viral in under 5 minutes, and Horizon Air's stock ticker on the in-flight entertainment system showed a sharp dip, a 2-point drop within the past hour. Gasps of surprise rose as people saw the numbers. Robert leaned back and studied the cabin, noticing small gestures of kindness. An elderly man in coach offered Angela his armrest. 2 flight attendants brought free drinks to midfield rows. Passengers in business class started sharing their own stories of facing discrimination. It felt like a ripple effect of empathy had washed through the entire aircraft. He caught Angela's eye and smiled. "We made a difference today," he said quietly. She nodded, squeezing his hand. "Yes, a huge one." Minutes later, a fresh chime came over the intercom. "This is Captain Walters again. In recognition of Mr. King's calm leadership and Ms. King's grace under pressure, Horizon Air is upgrading all remaining passengers in the main cabin to premium economy for the duration of this flight. Complimentary Wi-Fi and meal vouchers will be provided, courtesy of our apology. Thank you for your understanding." Mobility, the cabin echoed with cheers and relieved laughter. Even the most seasoned travelers wiped tears from their eyes. The rest of the flight unfolded like a celebration. Crew members moved through the aisles with genuine smiles, offering snacks and drinks to every passenger. Victoria Morgan quietly refilled glasses herself, making eye contact and nodding her head in shame and remorse with each apology. Emily Stone stayed by her side, offering a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing," she repeated softly. "Just keep doing it." Little Noah darted down the aisle to the cockpit door and knocked gently. Captain Walters peered out. "Hey there, sport," he said, opening the door. He invited Noah in, explaining the controls in simple terms as the boy's eyes widened at the array of buttons and gauges. Angela and Robert watched from the galley entrance, grateful for the kindness shown to their son. For a moment, all the hurt and anger turned into a shared human connection. As the approach to the destination airport neared, the cabin buzzed with story sharing. Passengers exchanged contact info, promising to keep in touch. The flight attendants distributed commemorative pins bearing the slogan, "Fly with respect." When the landing gear touched the runway, applause broke out again, not just polite claps but sustained, heartfelt cheers. It was as if the entire aircraft had been united by this journey. Once the plane docked at the gate, a small crowd of ground staff and reporters awaited. Cameras flashed as the King family emerged, escorted by the CEO herself, Margaret Sinclair. She presented them with formal letters of apology, signed by every member of Horizon Air's board of directors. Journalists peppered Angela with questions. "How does it feel to be vindicated? What message do you have for other companies?" She answered with poise. "Treat every customer with dignity, regardless of race or status. Respect is not optional. It is our responsibility." In the days that followed, the story dominated headlines. Airline owner humiliated, family takes a stand, company overhauls bias training. Social justice advocates praised the Kings for their restraint and courage. Horizon Air's share price gradually rebounded as investors saw the swift leadership response. The company's pledge of $1 million to anti-bias initiatives became the benchmark for other airlines. Back at home, Robert reviewed the flight footage one more time. He spotted a moment he'd missed. When Victoria Morgan first realized who they were, her eyes widened in recognition before panic set in. He felt a twinge of compassion. People make mistakes, he reminded himself. It is how they respond that matters. He called Victoria a week later and invited her to lead a workshop on unconscious bias at his. She agreed, voice trembling but determined. Angela organized a charity gala 2 months later, raising funds to provide scholarships for underrepresented students in aviation. Little Noah performed a short cheerleading routine, toy airplane in hand, bringing laughter and applause. The family had turned their humiliation into an opportunity for change, touching lives far beyond that flight. On what had started as an ordinary journey, extraordinary events unfolded. A family's quiet dignity collided with prejudice, and instead of anger, they offered the world a lesson in composure and justice. The airline that once threatened to remove them paid the price, but also learned to do better. In the end, respect soared higher than any plane, lifting every soul on board. And that, more than anything, is the kind of journey worth taking. Veronica stood frozen as Robert King rose from his seat, his posture regal despite the first-class carpet beneath him. He waited in silence while Angela, grasped little Noah's hand firmly. Noah clutched his toy airplane, oblivious to the storm around him, his eyes wide as he skipped beside his mother. Passengers in the aisle paused, phones lowered, every eye glued to the unfolding scene. Veronica's fingers trembled on the tray table as she swallowed hard. She knew the executive order: escort them back, guarantee no further disturbance. Yet the damage was done. She could feel Angela's calm dignity cutting through her guilt, and Noah's innocent smile twisted Veronica's stomach with regret. Robert King led his family forward with measured steps, their presence commanding respect. The murmurs swelled into soft applause as they re-entered first class. Angela straightened her shoulders, chin lifted, showing no hint of the humiliation she'd endured, but her eyes glinted with determination. Noah's laughter bubbled up as he reached his old seat and saw Veronica waiting, vessels of water and blankets arranged precisely, each pillow fluffed. Veronica's voice wavered when she offered a final apology. "If there's anything else you need, please let me know," she managed. Robert's nod was polite but resolute. "We will let you know," he said softly, and she retreated, face ashen, nerves frayed. In the galley, Emily Stone watched Veronica's retreating back, shaking her head in pity and frustration. "It's not over," Emily whispered. Veronica didn't respond. She hovered by the phone, dread pooling in her chest. The cabin behind her buzzed with whispers about what might come next. One passenger asked another if they thought the family would file a lawsuit. Another muttered that treating paying customers like criminals was beyond disgraceful. Each hushed remark felt like a physical blow. Veronica's uniform, once crisp and authoritative, now felt like a shackle. She longed to vanish, to rewind, to undo the assumptions that had exposed her worst instincts. Moments later, the phone buzzed again. Veronica picked it up with trembling fingers, her voice a ghost of itself. "This is Veronica." The captain's tone was cold and uncompromising. "Ms. Summers, the executive office reports that Mr. King's legal team is watching. They require a full account of events upon landing. Prepare yourself." Her grip tightened so hard her knuckles whitened. "Yes, Captain," she whispered, hanging up before anyone could hear her shame. She sank into a nearby chair, head in her hands as Emily Stone placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You should have thought of that before you humiliated them," Emily said quietly. The words cut deeper than any reprimand. Veronica nodded, tears burning her eyes. Back in first class, Robert King settled into his restored seat, his expression calm but his mind working. Angela sat beside him, her hand resting on Noah's knee as he examined his toy airplane. "You've been awfully quiet," Angela said gently, voice soft. Robert met her gaze, his jaw firm. "This isn't just about us," he replied. "It's about accountability. People like her need to learn there are consequences for prejudice." Angela's eyes softened with pride. She knew Robert's methodical approach. that he would leverage every channel of power to ensure this never happened again to anyone. Noah sipped juice quietly, blissfully unaware of the weight his family carried. As descent began, the cabin crew prepared for landing, but the tension remained undiminished. Veronica paced the galley, haunted by every glance she'd exchanged with the Kings. One of the ground crew officers approached, clipboard in hand, surveying her with thinly veiled disapproval. She looked away, unable to meet his eyes. Behind her, Emily Stone gathered duty-free carts, her expression unreadable. Veronica fought the urge to apologize again, to the walls, to the seats, even to the tray tables. If only she could erase the memory of her own cruelty. The plane touched down with a gentle bump, landing gear humming against the runway. A ripple of applause broke out, this time less polite, more spontaneous. A celebration of justice restored. Passengers gathered belongings, still buzzing about the King's quiet strength. Veronica stood by the galley door, heart pounding, as executives in tailored suits and uniformed security boarded. Two officers stepped forward, their badges gleaming. "Ms. Summers," one said, voice firm, "you are to remain on board for questioning. Please follow us." She nodded, unable to speak, and led the way down the aisle before the Kings. As she passed them, Robert caught her eye. His look was neither cruel nor forgiving, but it held a promise. He would see this through to the end. Past the jet bridge, Vice President of Operations David Reynolds waited, arms folded. He offered his hand awkwardly to Robert. "Mr. King," he began, voice formal yet pained. "On behalf of Horizon Air, I extend our deepest apologies. What you and your family endured was unacceptable. We are investigating this matter thoroughly." Robert shook his hand firmly. Angela and Noah stood beside him, poised and still. "Thank you for your apology," Robert said. "But I expect more than words. I want to see real change. Bias training for every crew member, public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and lasting policy revisions. And I want Ms. Summers to be held accountable so this never happens again." Reynolds swallowed. "We will comply fully," he promised. Behind them, Veronica emerged from the cabin under escort, her uniform damaged by tears and sweat. Passengers on the jet bridge paused to watch. Some averted their eyes in sympathy, others stared in judgment. She felt the collective weight of their scrutiny, every guilty thought magnified. The security officers walked her past the board of directors waiting nearby. Stern faces, ties pulled tight, posture rigid. They watched as she approached Robert King. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "Mr. King, I am truly sorry. I was wrong. I hope you can forgive me." Robert held her gaze for a long moment, then looked past her to the executives behind her. "I accept your apology as the first step," he said, "but forgiveness must be earned through action." That evening news headlines splashed across every device. "Billionaire family prevails after in-flight discrimination. Airline execs promise overhaul. Flight attendants suspended pending investigation." Social media feeds overflowed with support for the Kings and condemnation of prejudice. Stocks in Horizon Air dipped further as investors reacted to the uproar. The story became a catalyst for dialogue about unconscious bias in the industry. And somewhere, Veronica sat in an empty crew room, replaying every moment, determined to learn from her worst instincts and rebuild her integrity. As Robert, Angela, and Noah walked into the terminal under a canopy of flashing cameras and flashing smiles, they felt the kindness of strangers ripple outward. Their dignity had been tested and proven unbreakable, and the word accountability had finally found its home at 35,000 feet. Veronica Summers sat rigidly as the gray-suited man leaned back in his chair, arms folded, his eyes narrowing. His name tag read David Feldman, and beside him sat two colleagues, Marisol Gonzalez with a clipboard, her lips pressed in a thin line, and Daniel Wu tapping at his laptop keys. The ticking clock on the wall grew louder in the hush. Marisol cleared her throat. "Miss Summers, do you comprehend the implications of your statement that you removed first-class passengers based on how they looked?" "First class," she whispered, pausing as her cheeks burned. She nodded so hard her head hurt. "I understand that now," she stammered, voice barely above a whisper. "I made a mistake." Feldman's grin was thin, predatory even. "Intentions are irrelevant," he said, voice crisp. "Actions have consequences. You removed a family with confirmed first-class reservations and humiliated them. That is unacceptable." Veronica swallowed, her throat dry. "I thought there was a problem with their tickets," she managed. "I thought I was doing my job." Feldman's gaze bored into her. "Your job is to serve, not to judge." He glanced at Gonzalez, who tapped her pen against the clipboard. "We will document your account and recommend disciplinary action. That may include suspension, mandatory retraining, or termination, depending on our final report." Veronica's fingers trembled on the table. "I understand," she said, voice shaking. Meanwhile, at the baggage claim area, Robert King watched the conveyor belt churn through luggage after luggage, none of which belonged to them. Angela King stood beside him, arms crossed, Noah perched on a nearby bench, tracing patterns on his toy airplane with chubby fingers. They had agreed to meet the CEO at the airport, but first they had to retrieve their belongings. A small inconvenience compared to the humiliation they endured. When the board's limousine rolled up, they loaded their suitcases and climbed in, their steps measured and their expressions unreadable. Angela gave Robert's hand a reassuring squeeze. "We're doing the right thing," she said softly. He nodded. "It's only beginning." Back in the conference room, Feldman shifted his posture. "Miss Summers," he said, "we will forward our preliminary findings to the executive office along with your statement. You may return to duty pending further notice, but you are not to interact with Flight 237's crew or passengers. You will attend mandatory diversity and unconscious bias training, and your performance will be monitored for 6 months." Veronica closed her eyes, relief and dread colliding. "Thank you," she whispered, almost inaudible. As she stood, Daniel Wu slipped her printed packet. "This contains the training schedule and your next steps. You must sign and return it before leaving." Veronica nodded and gathered her courage. Outside, Robert King's phone buzzed. It was an email from their corporate counsel, confirming that the airline's board of directors had been notified and were launching an independent investigation. Robert tapped out a reply. "Thank you. We expect a thorough review and will hold you to the highest standards." The email went out with a sense of finality. Angela watched him, pride softening her features. "You're making them sweat," she said with a half smile. He looked at her and Noah, now yawning and leaning against Angela's leg. "This is for everyone who gets treated like we did," he said. "We can't let this sort of thing happen to those without our resources." That evening, Horizon Air ComCom lit up with news of the incident. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire family oust airline over discrimination. CEO orders full investigation. Flight attendants suspended after humiliating owners." On social media, King family justice trended. Posts calling for stronger passenger rights flooded the timelines of flight crew forums. The next morning, the airline's stock ticker showed a 3% dip, a tangible sign of public disapproval. Analysts speculated on the financial damage, predicting a multi-million-dollar hit if the board failed to act swiftly. Robert read the articles over breakfast with Angela and Noah, who poked at his pancakes. "This is good," he said quietly. "They're paying attention." Within 24 hours, Robert's inbox filled with correspondence from advocacy groups and civil rights organizations, praising the King's restraint and offering support in drafting policy reforms. Angela organized a virtual meeting with the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People to discuss best practices for corporate accountability. Robert dialed in, introducing himself as a primary shareholder committed to systemic change. His calm, measured tone impressed the NAACP board chair, who agreed to collaborate on new airline industry guidelines. They would propose mandatory anti-bias certification for all crew members and a confidential passenger complaint hotline directly tied to senior executives. On day 2, the airline's CEO, Margaret Sinclair, issued a public statement. Horizon Air apologizes unreservedly to Robert, Angela, and Noah King for the unacceptable treatment they received. We are overhauling our protocols, investing in expansive diversity training, and restructuring our leadership oversight to ensure respect for every passenger. We thank Mr. King for holding us accountable. However, the statement also revealed that Veronica Summers had been placed on unpaid leave, pending the outcome of the board's inquiry. The announcement landed with a thud in the aviation community, a clear sign that the airline was serious. That afternoon, Robert and Angela attended a televised town hall with Sinclair and other airline executives. Cameras rolled as Sinclair detailed the new 5-point plan. First, mandatory sensitivity workshops for all staff within 30 days. Second, a passenger rights ombudsman reporting directly to the CEO. Third, regular audits of crew conduct by third-party firms. Fourth, an annual public report on complaints and resolutions. Fifth, a fund to support discrimination victims with initial contributions of $5 million. Sinclair looked directly at the camera. Mr. and Mrs. King, your dignity inspired this reform. We are committed to change. The audience erupted in applause. Behind the scenes, Robert texted his legal advisor. This is a strong start, but we need enforcement mechanisms. He recommended including financial penalties for infractions, such as automatic compensation for victims and board-level penalties for repeat offenders. Sinclair agreed via email, asking for concrete language to include in the final policy document. Meanwhile, Angela coordinated with the PR department to highlight the airline's new anti-bias initiatives on social media and in in-flight magazines. Noah, oblivious to strategy discussions, chased butterflies in the garden outside their home, giggling as Angela watched with a soft smile. In the weeks that followed, Horizon Air staff across the country attended training delivered by top civil rights educators. Flight attendants practiced role-playing exercises, learning to recognize and combat their own unconscious biases. Corporate-level executives, some who had never set foot in a cabin, spent nights reviewing passenger feedback logs. Veronica Summers, meanwhile, sat in a small training room with a handful of other employees under the watchful eye of Dr. Simone Hawthorne, a renowned expert on workplace inclusion. Veronica's eyes brimmed with tears as she confronted the prejudices she had long ignored. She apologized repeatedly, promising to carry the lessons forward. The story reached the halls of Congress when a senator publicized the incident during a hearing on consumer protections. Questions were raised about industry-wide standards and the role of government oversight in ensuring airlines treat all passengers respectfully. Robert testified by video link, delivering a poised, powerful statement. The issue transcends one flight or one family. It's about systemic change. We need enforceable regulations, clarity on passenger rights, and mechanisms to hold corporations accountable. Senators nodded, some wiping tears, and a bipartisan bill was introduced to strengthen anti-discrimination rules in air travel. As months passed, the airline's stock rebounded, bolstered by the public's recognition of meaningful reform. Customer satisfaction scores rose, especially among minority travelers who felt the airline was now more inclusive. Horizon Air became an industry case study on effective crisis response and corporate responsibility. Robert received invitations to speak at leadership conferences, sharing how individual action can spark institutional change. Angela's collaboration with the NAACP led to scholarship programs for young people of color pursuing aviation careers. honoring the memory of the experience that ignited their activism. Veronica Summers, once the villain of the story, emerged as a reluctant advocate. After completing her training, she volunteered to co-facilitate workshops for other crew members, sharing her journey from prejudice to accountability. Passengers who recognized her on flights offered nods of encouragement. One family handed her a thank you card, saying her apology and subsequent actions restored their faith in humanity. Veronica's career path shifted. She was promoted to a liaison role, overseeing passenger-crew relations, ensuring that dignity remained at the forefront of every interaction. A year after the incident, Robert, Angela, and Noah boarded another Horizon Air flight as ordinary customers, not owners, greeted by a smiling attendant who welcomed them by name. The cabin felt warmer, the crew more attentive, the passengers more respectful. Angela watched Noah settle into his seat, the same toy airplane at his side. Robert leaned in and whispered, "We did it." She nodded, eyes shining. "Not just for us," he added. "For everyone." The final twist came when Horizon Air's board presented Robert King with the inaugural Dignity in Travel Award, an honor reserved for those who champion passenger rights. Sinclair handed him the crystal plaque at a gala attended by industry leaders, government officials, and civil rights activists. Applause thundered as Robert accepted, his speech brief and heartfelt. "Thank you. I stand here because dignity matters. When we lift each other up, we all soar." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. For a woman of 65 watching this story unfold, the lesson resonates deeply. Courage and compassion can move mountains, or at least an entire airline. The King's calm but relentless pursuit of justice transformed a moment of hurt into a beacon of hope, proving that respect is not a luxury, it is a right. Their journey reminds us that even in the face of prejudice, a single family's voice can spark change that echoes across boardrooms, capitals, and the skies above us all. Months passed, but Robert King could not shake the sense that the fight was far from over. Every morning he scanned news feeds for updates on Horizon Air's progress. At first, the headlines were hopeful. Board shakeout, new CEO appointment, fresh corporate-wide training programs. Yet behind the scenes, some of the same executives who had promised change now whispered that the Kings were pushing too hard, that their demands threatened the airline's profitability. In one meeting, a newly appointed vice president argued that diversity training was too costly and suggested scaling it back. Robert learned of this through a confidential tip from an honest manager in the training department. That revelation stung because it meant the same old resistance still simmered beneath the veneer of reform. He knew he needed to raise the stakes once again and make sure accountability could not be brushed aside. Angela King watched her husband pore over spreadsheets late into the night and worried it might consume him. Yet she understood he felt a responsibility that extended far beyond their own family's ordeal. Hundreds of passengers had since come forward with similar stories of bias. Some subtle, some outright. Angela arranged a series of listening sessions at community centers in Chicago, Los Angeles, and Atlanta, inviting people of all backgrounds to share their experiences traveling with Horizon Air. They collected hundreds of testimonies, documenting instances where staff had ignored, insulted, or wrongly removed passengers from premium cabins. Each story was heart-wrenching: a young black mother forced to sit in a cramped middle seat, an elderly Asian man whose name was mispronounced and mocked, a Latinx couple whose loyalty program status was invalidated on a whim. The volume of evidence was staggering and deeply saddening. Meanwhile, the airline's executive office stuttered. Press releases hailed the diversity task force's achievements, but internal reports revealed many flight attendants skipped the mandatory workshops or treated them as mere formalities. The training sessions that once had Robert and Angela as sponsors were watered down to online modules that crew members completed in 10 minutes before their next flights. The glide path toward genuine change threatened to stall. That is when Robert decided to take a bold step. On a sunny morning in Washington, D.C., he convened a press conference on Capitol Hill, alongside civil rights leaders he had partnered with. Journalists gathered under the marble colonnades as Robert King spoke into multiple microphones. "We appreciate the steps Horizon Air has taken, but words alone will not suffice. We need enforceable regulations from the Department of Transportation to ensure every airline is held to the same standard. Until these measures are in place, prejudice will persist." His calm, authoritative tone resonated with the assembled crowd. Reporters pounced on his call for federal oversight. Within 24 hours, the Department of Transportation announced an investigation into discrimination practices across all U.S. carriers. Horizon Air's stock took another hit, sliding 2 points as investors braced for potential fines and stricter regulations. The airline's board scrambled to restore confidence. Margaret Sinclair, the interim CEO, issued an urgent memo. All diversity training must be reset and overseen by a new external advisory board composed of civil rights experts. We will allocate $10 million from our contingency fund to support this. That announcement made headlines, but Robert and Angela knew the real work lay in implementation, not spin. On one particularly tense Thursday, Robert flew back to Horizon Air's headquarters for a highly anticipated board meeting. He and Angela arrived at the glass-walled boardroom where executives in tailored suits waited. Robert's legal counsel flanked him, and a roster of community leaders sat opposite the board. Richard Reynolds, the vice president who once balked at training costs, cleared his throat and began to speak. "Mr. King, while we appreciate your advocacy, these initiatives are straining our operational budgets. Flight delays have increased as crew schedules were disrupted to accommodate training. Our bottom line suffers." A murmur rippled through the room. That was the moment Robert had been waiting for. He leaned forward, his expression steady. "Flight delays are temporary. The cost of prejudice is permanent. What price would you place on a passenger's dignity or safety? If you cannot sustain an airline culture where every human being is respected, then you have no business running an airline." The room went silent. A hush fell as board members exchanged uneasy looks. Angela watched from Robert's side, her heart pounding. One by one, executives realized they were cornered. In that moment, power shifted. The board's counsel signaled that the external advisory board would have veto power over any policy changes that diluted diversity training or ignored discrimination complaints. It was a watershed moment, one that solidified the King's influence in reshaping the airline's culture. Still, the conflict was not confined to boardrooms. Veronica Summers's journey continued in parallel. After her initial hearing and mandatory training, she was reinstated in a customer relations role, monitoring the new bias hotline calls. The first few weeks were jarring. Every complaint about Horizon Air, from misrouted baggage to rudeness, landed on her desk and reopened old wounds. She would listen to voicemail after voicemail of passengers describing moments of deep hurt. Veronica found herself breaking down in the office bathroom, yet she refused to turn away. In her new role, she could see the human cost of discrimination firsthand. She resolved to make a meaningful difference. One day, Veronica received a voicemail from a middle-aged black teacher, Mrs. Caldwell, who had been forced to switch seats to accommodate a nondescript passenger with a more appealing appearance. Mrs. Caldwell's voice trembled as she recounted crying in her seat. Veronica immediately called her back. She apologized profusely, invited her to share her story on a recorded training video, and arranged for her to meet with the CEO personally. That act of genuine empathy became a turning point in Veronica's career. Word spread that she had gone above and beyond to make amends. Some colleagues began to see her not as the villain of Flight 2037, but as the embodiment of change from within. Meanwhile, the public saga intensified. Social media continued to buzz with the hashtag #RespectInTheSky. Blogs, podcasts, and TV panels debated airline loyalty versus customer dignity. Several consumer rights groups launched mobile apps that let passengers rate airlines on prejudice-free travel. Horizon Air found itself under the microscope, and in response, agile executives rolled out a dedicated respect team headed by Veronica, funded to investigate every bias complaint within 24 hours. Passengers soon received personalized letters from Veronica, thanking them for coming forward and detailing how their feedback would inform policy changes. But resistance persisted in unexpected places. Rumors circulated that some senior pilots were quietly lobbying for exemptions from certain sensitivity trainings, arguing that it infringed on their freedom and trivialized safety protocols. A clandestine petition circulated among a small group of flight and ground staff, decrying the overreach of diversity mandates. When the respect team uncovered the petition, it confronted the signatories with evidence that their actions violated workplace guidelines and could lead to discipline. The pilots were furious. They threatened legal action, invoking collective bargaining agreements. At that moment, Robert and Angela realized the struggle would be a protracted cultural war, not a single battle. Robert decided to engage with the pilots directly. He invited their union representatives to a neutral venue, the Flight Simulator Training Center. There, he and Angela stood before a room of veteran pilots, their uniforms a reminder of the institution's traditions. Angela spoke first, her voice gentle yet unwavering. "We honor your expertise and dedication, but we ask for your empathy. Imagine a passenger whose world has been turned upside down by discrimination. Your actions can heal or deepen that wound. You hold someone's dignity each time you welcome them aboard." Robert followed with practical proposals, peer-led workshops where pilots would share stories of passenger resilience, integration of bias scenarios into simulator training, and a recognition program for crews who exemplified respect under challenging circumstances. At first, the pilots scoffed, but as Robert and Angela shared raw testimonials from passengers, some of whom had overcome systemic injustice and found hope in small acts of kindness, the pilots' defenses weakened. One by one, hands went up with questions. How do we handle a passenger who refuses to deplane? What if a colleague crosses the line? The respect team provided clear protocols. By dusk, a tentative agreement emerged. Pilots would participate in quarterly bias awareness sessions, and their union would support the respect team's confidential reporting system. It was far from perfection, but it marked a rare moment of unity across once divided ranks. Back at the headquarters, the boardroom buzzed with victory, tempered by caution. Sinclair announced that the airline's culture overhaul would become a case study at aviation conferences worldwide. They would host workshops for other carriers, share best practices, and even partner with international bodies to raise global standards. The airline's new mantra, "Dignity above all else," was emblazoned on promotional materials and uniform work badges. Employees now passed one another with nods of mutual respect rather than stiff professionalism. Even in the bustling terminals, you could feel a subtle shift, a collective commitment to human kindness at 35,000 feet. By the time the federal investigation reached its conclusion, the Department of Transportation praised Horizon Air's proactive reforms and declined to impose fines, noting that the airline had exceeded the new minimum standards. That outcome triggered a cascade of praise from consumer watchdogs and civil rights organizations. Robert, Angela, Veronica, and Sinclair were invited to the White House to share their story at a ceremony celebrating corporate citizenship. Cameras captured Veronica standing alongside the kings, her posture no longer burdened by shame but radiating determination. She had come full circle, from the woman who nearly derailed a family's flight to an architect of corporate transformation. Yet, the kings knew their work would never truly be done. Prejudice lurks where least expected, and the power dynamics of air travel mirror those of society at large. So Robert established the King Foundation for Dignified Travel, funding research into bias across all modes of transportation and beyond. Angela led an annual summit that brought together airlines, consumer groups, and passengers to reassess policies and share fresh insight. Veronica took on the role of director for Horizon Air's Respect team, mentoring new hires and championing passengers' voices in executive councils. On the 2-year anniversary of Flight 237, the entire King family boarded a Horizon Air flight once again. This time they wore casual clothes, ordinary travelers among ordinary travelers. As they settled into their expanded economy seats, complimentary upgrades courtesy of the Respect team, they felt a quiet pride. Across the aisle sat a family from Texas, waving at little Noah, who grinned and shared his toy airplane. Flight attendants moved through the aisle with genuine smiles, addressing each passenger by name and asking if they needed anything else. The atmosphere was one of genuine connection, not mere courtesy. Robert leaned over to Angela, his voice soft. "We've built something lasting," he said. Angela smiled, her eyes misty with emotion. "Dignity never took off on that first flight," he added, "but today it soars." At that moment, as the plane ascended into clear blue skies, they knew their legacy would endure. One respectful gesture, one policy, one life at a time. Veronica Summers sat before the review panel, heart pounding as Vice President Richard Reynolds leaned forward, eyes cold. "Your role," he said, "is to uphold the airline's standards and guarantee every passenger has a positive experience. Today you failed, and that failure carries serious repercussions not only for you, but for the entire company." His words cut like ice. Marisol Gonzalez tapped her pen against her clipboard, pressing Veronica to recount every moment. Daniel Wu flicked through security footage, pausing on frames of Veronica's rigid posture as she escorted Robert King and his family from first class. They questioned her for hours, their tone clinical but merciless. "You decided based on appearance, not policy. You humiliated one of our primary shareholders. There is no excuse." Veronica's throat dried as she tried to explain she'd simply followed protocol. Their faces offered no sympathy. The panel's silence pressed on her until she felt as if all her strength had drained away. When the session ended, Veronica walked out numb. In the hallway, a giant screen displayed the latest headlines. "Primary airline shareholder demands sweeping reform after discriminatory incident on board." Her stomach twisted as she realized that her actions had become a national scandal. Reporters had already dug into her background. Tweets exploded condemning her bias. Every ding on her phone brought another notification. Strangers praising the King family's dignity, others praising the airline's swift response, while some blasted the company's culture. Veronica pressed her hand to her forehead, wishing she could vanish. She understood this was only the beginning of her reckoning. Back in their elegant home, Robert King scrolled through his laptop in his study. Headlines ranged from "Airline in hot water after mistreatment of owner's family" to "Discrimination on Flight 237 sparks outrage." Public sentiment overwhelmingly supported him. Comments poured in from people sharing their own stories of bias. Stories far less high professional than his, but no less painful. Robert felt a surge of empathy and responsibility. He set the laptop aside, steeling himself for the next day's meeting with CEO William Hayes. In the living room, Angela King paused the news segment on systemic bias in customer-facing industries. The commentator argued that if a billionaire family could be humiliated, imagine how often everyday travelers suffered unnoticed. Angela muted the TV and watched little Noah build a tower of blocks, his laughter echoing innocence. Her heart ached for every parent whose child faced such shame. She vowed to protect that innocence at any cost. Meanwhile, at Horizon Air's headquarters, CEO William Hayes paced the glass-walled conference room. Senior executives huddled around him, eyes red from sleepless nights. "This situation is a disaster," one remarked as he rifled through printouts of social media stats showing a 20% spike in negative sentiment. Another executive added that the airline risked losing Robert King's investment and, worse, its reputation. William put up his hand to hush them. "We need decisive action." "What's the status on the internal review?" he asked, voice sharp. The HR manager reported that Veronica Summers had been suspended pending further investigation. William's jaw tightened. Suspended is not enough. This involves a shareholder who has direct access to our board. We must show we mean business. He instructed the team to prepare an official apology, to restructure training, and to meet with Robert King immediately. They nodded, but the tension in their eyes spoke volumes about the stakes. That evening, Veronica received an email from HR. Her employment was terminated due to her conduct on Flight 237. Shocked and ashamed, she sank into silence, overwhelmed by public backlash and personal regret. Watching the news that night, she saw reports about unconscious bias and finally grasped the harm she'd caused. With trembling hands, she drafted an apology to the Kings, acknowledging her prejudice and responsibility. She sent it, knowing forgiveness wasn't guaranteed, but needed to try. Meanwhile, Robert King reviewed Horizon Air's reform plan. Mandatory bias training, audits, and progress reports. "It's a start," he told Angela, "but not enough." The next morning, at the airline's HQ, Robert met CEO William Hayes and firmly demanded public apologies, enforceable policies, and real accountability. Hayes agreed, and Robert made it clear, change must be lasting and public. As hashtags like airline accountability and bias in flight trended, the airline released a formal apology and policy plan. Angela forwarded it to Robert, who replied with a single word, adequate. But to him, actions spoke louder than statements. "If they fail," he told Angela, "they'll regret it." She assured him they'd hold the company accountable. Inside Horizon, Veronica's absence haunted the halls. Some staff sympathized, others felt justice had prevailed. Her former colleague, Emily, vowed quietly to never let passengers feel that kind of humiliation again. Back home, Robert prepared for a board hearing with data, testimonies, and reform proposals. Angela supported him fully. "We do this together," she reminded him. The next morning, media outlets ran the airline's apology beside quotes from Dr. King, while public debates raged online under tags like "Fly with Dignity." At breakfast, Robert told Angela and their son Noah, "We need to see action." Watching Noah play, Robert added, "We owe it to him." That afternoon, Robert returned to the executive floor to review the reform committee's work. Hayes announced deeper changes, monthly reports, financial penalties, and a passenger ombudsman. Robert pushed for these to be binding policies, not suggestions. The board agreed to amend corporate bylaws. In her apartment, Veronica reread her unanswered apology to the Kings, guilt weighing on her. A message from Emily offered support. Veronica responded with hope. "I want to make things right." Emily's reply, "That's the first step." Later, Robert and Angela spoke at a community center filled with people who'd faced discrimination in travel. Robert shared the new policies and emphasized the importance of lasting solutions. The room responded with tears, applause, and unity. Their ordeal had become a movement. Within weeks, airlines nationwide adopted similar reforms. The Kings were hailed as catalysts for change. Veronica enrolled in diversity training and began speaking publicly about her mistakes and growth. Passengers started seeing flight attendants as symbols of respect, not just staff. 2 months after Flight 237, the Kings flew again with Horizon Air. This time they were welcomed with warmth. Veronica, now a passenger advocate, personally apologized to them. Robert shook her hand, and fellow passengers applauded. Noah lifted his toy plane proudly. Angela whispered, "We did it." Robert nodded, "And we'll never stop holding them to it." In the cabin, respect reigned. As the plane soared, so did the hope that dignity in the skies had finally taken flight. Back in first class, the CEO handed Robert an apology card, sealed with the airline's new motto, "Respect above all." This wasn't a gesture, it was a reckoning. Veronica, now transformed, distributed flyers for the King Diversity Scholarship. Her voice quivered with sincerity. The cabin watched in awe as the woman once responsible for injustice became a symbol of change. Angela leaned in and whispered, "Step 1 complete. Now step 2. Robert smiled faintly. This wasn't vengeance, it was justice. And this time, as Noah pressed his nose to the window, Robert said with quiet certainty, "This time, everyone soars with dignity." A heartfelt thank you to each and every one of you who stayed with us until this very moment. Thank you. Thank you for giving your time, your attention, and most importantly, your heart. Whether you stumbled upon this story by chance or followed it from the beginning, your presence here means more than words can fully express. Creating something like this, something filled with emotion, pain, beauty, and truth, is not just about putting words or images together. It's about connection. It's about hoping that somewhere out there someone will feel seen, heard, understood. And now, seeing that you've made it this far, we know that connection has been made. That means everything. We know the world is full of noise. A million things compete for your time every single day. So when you choose to sit down and give a piece of your soul to a story like this, to feel, to think, to reflect, that's no small gesture. That is something we hold with deep gratitude. Maybe something in this journey spoke to a part of you that's been quiet for a long time. Maybe it reminded you of someone you love, something you lost, or something you've always believed in. Or maybe it simply made you stop and feel something real for a moment. However it reached you, we're so deeply honored that it did. Behind every frame, every word, every decision in this project, there was a hope that someone, somewhere, would be moved, that someone would find a little more light, a little more courage, or even just a little more understanding of the world around us. If you felt any of that, even for a moment, then this journey was worth every second. To those of you who laughed, who cried, who felt anger or joy or even frustration, we thank you. Feeling deeply is not always easy, but it is human. And if this story gave you space to feel, then we feel fulfilled in ways we cannot fully describe. Please know this, your view, your support, your presence here, it matters. It matters more than you know. It fuels the next story, the next message, the next voice that needs to be heard. So thank you. Thank you for being a part of something that matters. Wherever life takes you next, carry the lessons, the emotions, and the truth that spoke to you here. And if you ever need a reminder of strength, justice, kindness, or the beauty of simply being human, we hope you'll come back to this moment. With all our gratitude, thank you for watching. Thank you for feeling. Thank you for being here.